In a national emergency, no metal would likely prove more decisive than uranium. With an atomic number of 92, uranium is the heaviest of all elements, 18.7 times denser than water. Its naturally occurring radiation generates tremendous power from within the Earth's core, more than twice the level of global human energy consumption.
You can account for about 30 trillion watts in the form of radiation coming from the uranium-238 that was captured when the early Earth was formed in the core. That now acts like a small nuclear reactor. It's a natural source of heat that has to make its way to the outside of the planet, and it brings up quite a bit. And volcanoes today are living proof that something in the core of the Earth is generating a lot of heat.
The introduction of the atomic bomb in 1945 heralded uranium's immense potential as a destructive force. But splitting the atom also unleashed a vast, peaceful source of energy. There are 103 nuclear reactors operating across the United States, generating nearly 20% of the nation's electricity. Worldwide, 430 reactors help power 31 different countries. Like other metals, uranium is extracted through either underground or open-pit mining. The ore is pulverized, then treated with acid to dissolve out the uranium.
Uranium is radioactive, but it's not super radioactive. You can hold ore in your hands. You can actually come up to a fresh fuel assembly and inspect it very closely.
Uranium must be heavily processed to produce usable fuel. It's converted into a gas so that uranium-235, the fissile isotope needed to create a chain reaction, can be enriched from its natural state of 1% to 3 to 5%. After enrichment, the gas is reformed into uranium dioxide and molded into fuel pellets. The pellets are placed inside metal tubes and assembled into bundles for the reactor core.
What I have in front of me is a simulated fuel bundle. This fuel bundle is made up of fuel rods and cooling water rods. And these little rods that you see in front of me are what house the fuel pellets that are used to generate power in these bundles. The bottom is called a fuel support piece, which allows the bundle to rest in the core. The top here is what's called the bell handle, which is used to maneuver this fuel bundle around or to offload the bundle out of the core.
The civilian nuclear power industry grew out of the Cold War and the global arms race. Ironically, fully half of the uranium that powers American reactors now comes from dismantled Soviet nuclear weapons.
We get an economical source of the uranium, and better yet, about 10,000 Russian warheads have been destroyed in this process. And under the deal with Russia right now, it'll be 20,000 weapons destroyed and used in U.S. Reactors to produce electricity here.
Nuclear fission converts matter into energy that's released as immense amounts of heat. In nuclear reactors, uranium acts as a trigger, the initial power source for what eventually becomes electricity.
In a nuclear power plant, the uranium forms the heat source, and that heat is then transferred over to water, which heats the water, and the hot water does the actual work of driving a turbine, very much as it would in a coal-fired or an oil-fired plant.
But nuclear fission is supremely potent. A uranium pellet the size of a peanut generates the same amount of energy as 1,780 pounds of coal, or 149 gallons of oil.
Underneath that pool of water and that stainless steel head is a dry well compartment. That compartment contains the reactor vessel. That reactor is currently operating at 100% power, supplying the energy needs of over 1 million people.
The most visible part of a nuclear power plant, the cooling tower, is actually the safest. Towers like this one at Grand Gulf Station in Fort Gibson, Mississippi, merely release steam, which is a byproduct of the generation process. The vapor is inert, and a cooling tower could be destroyed without releasing any radiation into the atmosphere. The reactor is the heart of a nuclear plant. Elaborate security systems, multiple engineering redundancies, and backup power sources all have a single ultimate goal: to ensure that the nuclear rods stay underwater and under control.
The concern is making sure we always have enough water to keep a sufficient level above top of active fuel to keep from having the fuel bundles get too hot.
The bundles generate such intense heat that if not adequately cooled by water, they would quickly begin to melt their containment vessel and release radioactivity. This happened at Chernobyl in 1986. Nuclear rods decay over time, and after 5 years are transferred from the reactor to a nearby spent fuel pool. Uranium isotopes continue to radiate considerable heat, so rods cool in the pool for 10 to 20 years before they're ready for dry storage. Because they remain radioactive for thousands of years, safe long-term storage presents a difficult and as yet unresolved dilemma. While nuclear power and atomic weaponry employ the same raw material, uranium-235, a warhead requires uranium at a bomb-grade purity of nearly 90%. This mountain range north of Moab, Utah, played a unique role in the history of uranium mining. When the Soviet Union shocked the West by detonating its first atomic bomb in 1949, Cold War fears raged. In Washington, the Atomic Energy Commission decided to enlist civilian help to build the nation's uranium reserve. The AEC raised the base price for uranium ore and offered a $10,000 bonus for the highest grade material. Eastern Utah was well known for its uranium deposits, and thousands flocked to the region. Anyone with guts, vision, and luck had a chance to make their fortune. But few possessed those qualities in greater abundance than an unemployed Texas geologist named Charlie Steen.
Charlie hitchhiked down Highway 191 and walk in here for 3 days at a time. He'd pack all of his food and water. And then he wandered all through the hills and the canyons around here looking for his idea of what would be favorable areas for the discovery of uranium.
In 1952, Charlie drilled a discovery hole in the Mavita Plateau.
And he had to borrow a friend's Geiger counter to actually discover that, yes, it was uranium ore.
Charlie Steen had discovered the single largest deposit of uranium in the United States. Soon, this tunnel was built to exploit his claim. Word of the find triggered a human stampede.
There were all kinds of magazine articles about come down and get rich, you know, buy this Geiger counter, it's guaranteed to find you something. It's just like the gold rush. There was a lot of hype and misinformation.
There's legends, you know, stories of people renting small planes and throwing claim stakes out of the planes to try to cover as much ground as they could and tie up as much as they could.
The Salt Lake Stock Exchange went wild. It was selling penny ante stock in order to develop the mines to get them going.
Virtually overnight, Moab went from a sleepy hamlet of 1,200 to a boomtown of 5,000. All dreamed of striking it rich. Few actually did.
I was like some others, just going along and checking every rock that might look like I have ore in it. Sometimes you'd get excited and sometimes you wouldn't, because there's a lot of different rocks that do have radiation.
The AEC eventually phased out subsidies to private miners. The uranium market stabilized, and like all rushes, the great Utah boom turned to bust. But Moab would never be the same.
Moab was the first place in Utah that had liquor by the drink. It changed the culture, it changed the economy, it made a much more diverse culture here. It had a huge impact on Moab.
Today, rising oil prices have renewed interest in peaceful nuclear power. The United States is on the verge of granting permits for the first new construction of nuclear power plants in 30 years. And miners are once again scouting the hills near Moab, betting that uranium will one day make them rich. Uranium plays a key role in 21st century life. The vast construction projects that helped define the 20th century